Okay, so as I say, this morning we're going to be doing purchase ledger payments and Bacs processing. Last month we were looking at getting your money in using sales ledger credit control. So now we're going to be looking at actually paying our suppliers. We're using Sage 200 version 2015. So for those of you that are on an older version, don't worry about the actual look and feel of the screen. The actual processing is exactly the same as in previous versions. So it's still very relevant to yourselves. Okay, now when it comes to setting up our eBanking, all the hard work really is done within the Cashbook module. If I go to the Cashbook and look at our bank account list, you can have any number of bank accounts there. And for each bank account through which you're going to set up eBanking, you need to set up the eBanking details. If we just go into amend the bank account, there's a tab there that says eBanking. And what you need to do first of all is select the e-banking service that you're going to be using. So which bank account are you actually using and which service that they're providing are you using for your e-banking module. If the required bank is not on the list, then you just need to download the plug from the Sage website. And if you need any help with that, by all means give us a call and we can help you get that sorted. But there's a nice long list, quite a comprehensive list of banks and services available as standard. For the purposes of this morning's demonstration, we're going to be using Barclays Business Master, but as I say, other banking services are available. Now, depending on which banking service you're using, the functionality available will vary. Some services only offer payments, some services only offer bank reconciliations, and some services offer both a payments and reconciliation service. Now, again, for the purposes of this morning's demonstration, we're going to be looking at payments only. We need to determine where on our server our e-banking files are going to be stored. Now it's usually on a network location, but as I'm just working from my laptop, I'm pointing everything to my Drive C, and I've created a folder there called eBanking Files. If I wanted to have a different location for my reconciliation service or a different location for my payment file options, I would just tick the override common directory, and that opens up the directory then for each of those services, so I can point Sage to a different location for the reconciliation files as opposed to my payment files. With our payment files, by default, if I just get rid of that little file identifier, the file is going to be called today's date. So in our example here, it's going to be called 29/07/2016, and then tomorrow will be 30/07/16, and so on and so forth. What we can do is identify a prefix for our file if that's what we would like to use. So maybe for my demo data, I want the file identifier to be DD. The file extension, that will depend on your banking service. It's usually a text file, but some services require CSV files. And again, that's something that you'd need to clarify with the banking service that you're going to be using. Okay. So once you've entered our cashbook details, we can just save that, and our cashbook is now set up for eBanking. Within the purchase ledger, there are a couple of options. First of all, within the purchase ledger utilities, the ledger setup, we have ledger settings, and it's through here on our first options page that we tick if we want to use electronic bank payments. Once that's ticked, in our payment groups, we can set up any number of payment groups, and we can determine which of our payment groups are going to use this electronic payment service. So for each of our payment groups, there's a number of options available. First of all, the column here, Update, that's just telling Sage that once we've done our payment run, which I'm going to show you in just a moment, we want the purchase ledger to be updated with those payments that we've been generated. I can't see any reason why you would want to untick that, but some people would prefer to do the payment run just to get the reports and then manually put the payments onto the supplier account and allocate them accordingly. The second column we have here is Summarize. So we would really recommend that for your electronic payments paid suppliers, you tick that Summarize box. And what that will do is if you're paying 4 suppliers, say £100 each, on your bank account you will see just one transaction for £400, which will make it easier when it comes to your bank reconciliation. The remittance document there's a drop-down list available to us. So we have these options. We've got remittance and check, and that will print out the document. So you have the remittance at the top half of your document, and the check will be printed out in the bottom half of the document. You have remittance only paper, so that, as it says, is just going to provide a paper remittance advice. You have check only, so what you can do is a check run, and if you have the proper stationery from your bank, you can then print out the checks automatically using this process. We have electronic payment. That will produce the Bacs payment, but it won't produce a remittance advice. We have electronic payment with remittance advice. We have a remittance only, and that's for emailing your remittances. And we have electronic payment remittance email. You don't necessarily need to select the email options separately to the paper-only options, because we can set up the email sort of process within any of the documentation that's generated by Sage. We're going to be concentrating on our paid by eBanking suppliers in the first instance, so we want the electronic payment with a remittance, but I will also be having a little look at some check payments as well. If you want to, rather than assigning, creating all these different payment groups and assigning them to your suppliers, you can tick this option, which is all accounts use the same payment method, which just means you've only got the one payment method and you don't have to amend that within the supplier account. Okay, let's have a little look at some of our suppliers. I'm going to sort, first of all, let's have a little look at our first account. I'm going to amend this account. And we have a payment tab available to us, and it is through this tab that we select which payment group is relevant for this particular supplier. And we can select from any of the drop-down lists that we created within our purchase ledger option utilities. I have to say, if you're paying by eBanking, you must have the bank details set up within the supplier account. If you try to save this account with eBanking selected and no bank details, Sage will warn you and it won't allow you to save that supplier account. Just one notice, there is a bank payment reference. A little bit of note on the handouts. I've just noticed it says, please note the reference does not appear on the bank file. It's excuse me, it's just an internal reference. That's actually incorrect now. That reference does now export to your payment file. For our next supplier, if I just amend that account, we said they're paid directly by direct debit, so we collect payment by direct debit. So again, we just select the details within our payment tab. We don't necessarily have to have bank details because we're not automating or creating a file to go to our bank for this particular supplier. Okay, let's have a little look now at creating the payments file automatically. I'm actually going to just sort, I've added a column to my list view here, and I've added the payment group just so we can see quite clearly who we're paying in which particular group. I just have 3 suppliers that I'm paying by eBanking, and that's my Acer Products, Kitchen Builders and Kenway Limited. But I've got lots of other payment groups set up and lots of other suppliers that require paying. To access the payments process, we go into our purchase ledger period end routines, and there's a separate option in there called payment processing. Now, the fact it's under period end routines doesn't mean you're limited to running this on a monthly basis. You can run this as frequently as you choose to do so. It is just where the menu option is by default within the Sage menu structure. It's actually a process that we need to follow, and we just follow each of these menus sort of sequentially. And the first thing we need to do is to actually generate the suggested payments. Once we select that option, we get this screen coming up. It warns us that before running this routine, we need to make sure that all pending transactions have been updated, or payments and credits have been properly allocated. So basically saying you just need to be up to date. It's asking us for our remittance date. So we want to do a remittance date at the 31st of July. 16 would be better. And it's now asking us to pay invoices more than how many days overdue. This can be a little bit confusing, so I'll spend a little bit of time explaining this. Today's date is the 29th of July. So if I leave that as a 0, Sage will suggest we pay any invoices that are due up till today's date. However, I want my remittance to be dated as of the 31st of July, and I want all my invoices that are due up to that particular date to be included in this payment run. So what I can do in there is change that figure to a -2, and that's telling Sage that I want you to pay invoices that will be due in 2 days' time. So I'm looking into the future, and that will take my process up to the 31st of July. If I were running this process on the 2nd of August, I only wanted to pay my invoices that were due up until the 31st of July, in that box I would actually just put a +2. And that would be telling Sage that I only want to be paying invoices up to the 31st of July, so ignore the following 2 days. I don't know why they didn't just make it a date prompt, but they didn't, and it's always been like that. We have this other field here to include all invoices with settlement discounts regardless of their age. I'm inclined to just get into the habit of ticking that. A lot of people don't tend to use settlement discounts, but just in case one invoice sneaks in with a settlement discount, it means that you won't miss that payment on this payment run. Okie dokie. So we say OK, and if you haven't deleted the suggested payments from your prior run, you will get this message: a suggested payments file already exists. Do you wish to remove it? The answer will be yes. And what Sage is doing now is reading through all our suppliers and all the transactions on all the suppliers, and any invoices that will be due by the 31st of July, it's going to write to a suggested payments file. It's asking if we want to produce a suggested payments report. If you say yes to this, you will get a list of all the transactions on all the suppliers that are due for payment on this particular payment run. I'm inclined to suggest you say no to this prompt, and then you run the Report Suggested Payments option as a separate option. The reason being that when this loads, it will actually ask us which group we want to report on. So in this particular moment, I want to focus on my Paid by eBanking group, so I can say, right, my payment group is Paid by eBanking, and then OK. So I'm just going to get a list of those suppliers that are in that particular payment group and which Sage has suggested that I pay. A couple of points to note on there. It's in the notes that you have on the handouts, but at the bottom for each account you have the account total that's going to be paid, but you may get a message. It may, for example, say negative check value, and Sage won't pay a negative value. And it might say that it's a foreign currency account. Foreign currency accounts can't be paid on your Bacs runs. They have to be run separately through a separate routine. It may also say that the total exceeds the current balance. Now what this means is that you may have an invoice on a supplier account for £100, but maybe you've paid a £25 deposit for something that you're going to be invoiced for in the future. So the actual balance on that supplier account would be £75, but you want to raise a cheque or make a payment for £100, which is greater than the account balance. When we come to actually process the payments, there's a tick box which will allow us to override that anomaly, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Okay, so we have here our list of suggested payments for our eBanking. Now this is just Sage's suggested payments, and I always say it's your money. You're going to pay exactly who you want, the amount that you want, so you can amend the suggested payments to suit the payments that you actually want to make. So let's have a little look at what we can do with this data. We have an option in our payment processing that's called Amend Suggested Payments. We can select any of our supplier accounts, and we will see the payment column here is the payment that Sage is suggesting that we make to this supplier for these invoices. If we had invoices that were due in the future, we would still see them on here, but the payment value would be 0. So what we can do is we could choose to say, yes, we want to pay that particular invoice. We only want to pay £100 of that particular invoice, and we want to include a future dated invoice on this particular payment run. Let's have a little look at another one. So let's have a little look at our KIT. Okay, again, we have a list of all the invoices that Sage are suggesting we pay. And if you have a lot of transactions on a supplier account and you don't want to pay any or maybe just one or two, what you could do is just, rather than saying 0 and then arrowing down and doing 0, there's an option at the bottom here that says pay none. There's also the option to select pay all, so you can always toggle between the two options, to pay everything, to pay nothing, and then just amend the ones that you choose to do so. So as well as paying none and saving it through our amend suggested payments, if you don't want to pay a supplier at all, within delete suggested payments, you could select a single supplier, select your supplier, and then delete. And that's just a quick way again of just deleting all the suggested payments for a single supplier for this particular payment run. Okay, so once you've amended your suggested payments so that it reflects exactly what you want to be paying, we would really recommend that you run your suggested payments report again. Select the payment group, so paid by eBanking, and OK. And you'll see that this now reflects the changes that we've made. So we're only going to pay £100 against that particular invoice rather than the full value, which is what Sage originally suggested. I suggest you print this out, keep it for your records, so you've got a hard copy of what it is that this payment run is actually including. Okay, so we've generated our suggested payments and we've printed out our suggested payments report. We're making any amendments that we want to, printing our report again until we're happy with that suggested payments report. Actually, I'm just going to run it again because I didn't point out that as well as having the list of all the individual transactions, there is a report total, so you can see the total value that will be going out of your bank account for this particular payment run. Okay, we're happy with our suggested payment report. There is a maximum payment report. You can set within the purchase ledger parameters a maximum payment value. So if any of your payments to your accounts exceed that particular balance, this report will highlight those. Once we're happy with the report, the actual process is run again through payment processing and generate payments. We want to pay multiple suppliers, and so we select the payment group that we want to pay. So we're going to pay our eBanking suppliers. If you have analysis codes on your supplier accounts, you can select the analysis heading that you're wanting to select by and the value. So maybe you want to pay all your eBanking suppliers that are in the construction analysis code. Our remittance date is defaulted to the 31st of July because that's what we selected when we generated our suggested payments file. And we can also enter an allocation date. Now the allocation date will default to today's date, so you really need to ensure that that is within the same month as your remittance date. Otherwise it can cause discrepancies when you come to do a retrospective creditors report because the payment will have gone on one month but the allocation gone on a different month, and it just causes a little bit of confusion. It's asking for a batch reference. So if you're running a check run, then this will be the first free check number that you're going to write to accompany this particular payment. If you have, say, 4 or 5 different checks that are going to be run on this, Sage will increment that number by 1 for each check that's going to be processed using this process. For your Bacs payments, though, maybe I'll just pop in Bacs and today's date, or 31st of July 16. You also have a second reference available to you, so maybe I'll just pop in my initials as a second reference. This prompt here is the one that I was talking about just a little while ago. So if we have a balance on an account that's greater than less than the payment we're going to make, we can just tick this and it will allow us to exceed the account balance. We select the bank account that we're making the payment from, and we can also add messages to this payment run, which will show on our remittance advices. It is possible to set up a library of messages, but in this instance, because it's going to be unique for each payment run that we do, we can just type in a message line. So we could pop in here something like payment will clear on 31st of July. Oops, I can spell. and OK. OK, we're happy with our screen on our payment options, so we just select OK. Sage is now going to look at all the supplier accounts in our eBanking group, and it's going to make those payments. Now, because it's eBanking, we get this payment confirmation screen. It's telling us our account details, so it's coming out of our home style kitchen account, account number, sort code, and bank name. We're making a total of 3 payments, and the total value of our payments is £3,995. If we show the details, it will list all of those accounts or all of those suppliers showing their sort code, account number, name, the reference that demo data has been pulled through, and the amount that's going to be paid. We can actually print that out, okay, and that will show us just in notepad format the lists that we've got on our screen in front of us. So again, we could print that out to go with our suggested payments, just again as confirmation to ourselves of what we're actually processing. If there's a sort code missing or an account number missing, then Sage won't process the file. It won't process any of the payments, not just the ones that have the incorrect details. It'll stop the process, which is actually quite good. So we can then go back and change the erroneous supplier details, run this again, and we'll make that payment in its entirety. I'm going to say OK to that. So now it's asking us where we want to save our eBanking file to. And if you notice, it's defaulted the location to our eBanking files on the drive C, which we set in our cashbook parameters. And it's also defaulted our file name to DD and today's date. We can change that, so it's not written in stone. So if we were to do 2 payment runs, for example, on the same day, then the second one we can overwrite perhaps with a -2 at the end or something to make it sort of unique to our previous run. I'm quite happy with our file name, so I'm just going to save that file. Sage is now processing our payments. It's telling us payments were successfully made, so we just say OK to that. And we can see what it's done. It's produced a remittance advice for each of those 3 suppliers that have been paid using our eBanking. And what we can do is use the email option to email those remittances out to our particular suppliers. As we all know, the stationery layouts can be amended. They can be amended to suit your own organisation. So it would have your logo on there. We can have boxes and bold and underline and so forth. But the basic details are all there. So we've got our company name and address, the supplier's name and address, a list of the transactions that have been paid. And it also got our message on there that we entered when we created our suggested payments run. Let's also have a little look, if I just refresh my screen, at the transactions it's processed within the supplier account. If I go to my inquiries and my transaction inquiry, okay, I'm going to untick the show outstanding only because that payment obviously is no longer outstanding, or it isn't outstanding, so I can see that on my screen. So we've got the payment transactions with the date of the 31st of July, which is our payment processing date. The reference was our reference that we entered. Our second reference was the second reference we entered. And if I drill down to the allocation session, we can see the invoices that were picked up on this particular payment run. Okay. If I just close that and I go to my cash book, and I'm just going to have a little look at the transactions that were generated in my cash book. I just sort it by date. Okay, 31st of July, that's our payment that's been generated through the cash book. It's just the one transaction, even though we paid the 3 suppliers. It's got the same reference, the same second reference, but it's got a payment value of the total value, not the individual values. We can see here that it says group, and I can actually drill down to my trader transactions, and it's through this screen that I can see all the individual suppliers that were paid through that one Bacs payment that we processed this morning. Okay, so that's processing our payments using Bacs processing. I would always recommend that once you're happy, you've done all your payments, you actually delete your suggested payments, because what this will mean is that it'll if you have an active suggested payments file within the system, there is some functionality that you can't run, such as changing your settings in your purchase ledger or allocating a manual payment to an invoice that's been listed on the suggested payments file. So I suggest we just do delete suggested payments, delete all suggested supplier payments, and just delete from there. Are you sure? Then yes, I am. Okay, and that is our payment process. So nice and straightforward. Generate the suggested payments, print out the suggested payments, amend anything that you want to change, print it out again to make sure you have the correct details, generate the payments, which will do all of that processing. It'll put the payment onto the account, run the allocation, update the cash book, and produce the remittance advices. And then finally, we delete suggested payments. I'm just going to go back to my supplier list, because I just want to show you how to sort of make sort of ad hoc payments, but also how to deal with some errors that may occur. So I've sorted all my suppliers, excuse me, by payment group, and we have a couple of suppliers here that we pay by check. So what we could do, rather than generate suggested payments, if I want to make some ad hoc payments, I can just go into amend suggested payments. Let's call up our Texas hardware store. If you noticed, every invoice is listed there, but it has a 0 in the payment column. And I have a choice that if I want to, I could pay everything, and it's automatically filled in that to a total of £313. From there then, I might want to say, I don't want to pay everything, I don't want to pay that one, that one, that one, that one, and so on and so forth. And my total check payment will update accordingly. Let's just select another check paid supplier. So I'm going to select Stains, S-T-A. Okay, and again, there's just one invoice that's outstanding there, which I want to pay. So I could just double click in that, and that's another way of getting the full payment value to match your outstanding value. So I'm going to save that. Okay, so we have two suppliers that are paid by check that I have just set up manually through amend suggested payments. If I now report suggested payments for my paid by check suppliers, okay, we have our stainless steel account and we have our Texas hardware stores account, and that's it. So we have a total payment value of £615. Okay, let's process those checks. So I'm going to generate payments. I'm going to pay multiple suppliers paid by check. My first check number is going to be check number 123. And as I say, Sage will automatically increment our check numbers for each supplier that's being paid through this run. And okay. Okay, so check number 123 has been made to stainless steel. And if I scroll down, down, check number 125. I don't know why it's done that. I'm going to ignore that. I do apologise. So it increments the check number for each payment, check payment that it makes. So let's suppose that we made a mistake. We were writing check number 123, but instead of writing £367, we wrote £467. So we need to rip up that check and write a new one. What we can do is go back to generate payments, but we select reprint payments only. We select the account that we want to change. We enter the check number that we are now going to use as a replacement, and we say OK to that. It's now reproduced our remittance advice with check number 345. And if I just go and have a little look at the transaction inquiry, okay, it's updated the reference on our supplier account and in our cash book as well to reflect the revised check number that we're using on this particular supplier. Okay. So finally, even though I did an ad hoc payment, I would still suggest we delete everything so that we know that next time we do our payment run, we're starting from a clean sheet and we can actually start the next payment process afresh. So that really covers everything that we needed to do for our payment processing today. So short but sweet, but hopefully you picked up a few tips and it's clarified a few points that you may have had previously. But any questions, I will answer them as soon as I get back to my desk, and I'll answer you all individually. So thank you very much for your time. The next webinar will be the end of August, and we will actually be covering the new features of Sage 200 version 2016. So hopefully that will be sort of relevant to you all. So thanks again. Have a lovely weekend, and I'll speak to you all soon.